Hello everybody, this is Talon with another nutrition tier list, a series where I break down all the options in a given food group and rank them based on how nutritious they are and how good they are for your health. Today we're taking another dive into the world of seafood to cover the fish and shellfish that I didn't talk about last time. While seafood is just an extension of meat in a lot of ways, there are a few key differences that make it stand out nutritionally. In terms of nutrient contribution, the similarities include a high protein content, a relevant fat content, and a significant amount of many key vitamins and minerals, including the B vitamins, especially vitamin B12, vitamin D, copper, phosphorus, and selenium. There are two main traits that apply to just seafood though, one good, one bad. The first being the all-essential omega-3 fatty acids, the actually good ones too, docosahexaenoic acid and icosapentaenoic acid. The other being the detrimental and often overlooked heavy metals, mainly mercury that seafood inherently contains. Most don't have enough to be concerning when consumed in reasonable amounts, but I will be letting you know which ones do as we go through. For reference, low mercury fish and shellfish refers to those with less than 0.15 parts per million, and a high mercury fish is those that average more than 0.5 parts per million. Anything between those I'll refer to as a moderate mercury fish. Your frequency of consumption should definitely be influenced by this. Now, if you're interested in digging a bit more into the ins and outs of omega-3s and heavy metals, I have a couple of videos entirely dedicated to them that I'll link in the description. The other thing I need to get out of the way here is a bit of a disclaimer. A lot of the foods on this particular list are kinda just fish. Fish that y'all requested I cover, but admittedly I don't have a lot to say about many of them individually, as fish generally contribute these same nutrients and have the same risks. Some are just noticeably better for eating than others. I'm going to call out relevant variables and give the unique ones their spotlight, but I'm also going to speed through a lot of the ones that really are just a fish. Now, looking at the tiers for this video, we're going to be comparing the nutrient content and benefits of each food against any shortcomings or health concerns that they may have. Keep in mind that these lists are ranked independent of each other, so an A-tier fish may not equate to an A-tier fruit or an A-tier vegetable. The only exception being that I'm going to try and stay as consistent as possible with the first seafood tier list. All numerical nutritional information on this list and across this series will be based on 100 grams of the individual food, for the sake of consistency and ease of comparison. But since you made it this far, that means you clearly took the bait. The clickbait, that is. I'm just kidding, let's get to the list. First on this list, abalone is an average caloried saltwater mollusk with a standout micronutrient profile. Abalone uniquely contains an average of 7 grams of carbohydrates per 100 grams, and it's the best source on either list of vitamin K, specifically vitamin K2, which activates proteins that promote bone health. Abalone is also a relevant source of selenium, vitamin E, iron, and iodine, which is involved in the synthesis of thyroid hormones. Now, abalone is not for everyone, notably those with a shellfish allergy, but it is comparatively low in mercury like most shellfish. Overall, a really solid salty choice, abalone is going to be kicking off this list in the A tier. Bluegill is a lower-calorie, usually freshwater fish with a decent micronutrient profile. It is a solid source of protein per calorie as well as, for seafood at least, a respectable source of selenium, calcium, and magnesium. It is a low-mercury fish, but it is the first of many that is nutritionally kinda just a fish, and I'm gonna put it in the C tier. Burbot is a lower-calorie freshwater fish with a mediocre micronutrient profile. It's a good source of protein per calorie and among the best sources on this list of vitamin B1 and manganese. It's also higher in creatine, which provides energy to muscles, but it does contain a moderate amount of mercury. A fairly standard non-fatty fish that's going to be going in the C tier. Butterfish is a higher-calorie saltwater fish with a moderate micronutrient profile. It's a fattier fish, which does admittedly fit pretty well with its name, and it's among the better omega-3 sources. Butterfish also contains a solid amount of selenium and vitamin B12, and it is a generally safe low-mercury fish. One of the better, more standard fish to be sure, butterfish is going in the A tier. Chinook salmon is a high-calorie fish caught in both fresh and salt water with an excellent micronutrient profile. It is one of the few fish that is both very protein-dense and very high in fat, being one of the best fish in any body of water when it comes to its omega-3 content. Chinook is also the best source on this list of phosphorus, a mineral crucial for bone development, while it's among the best seafood sources of vitamin B3, magnesium, and vitamin A. And Chinook is also very low in mercury, as salmon typically is. At this point, I'm a firm believer in salmon superiority, and Chinook is no exception, as it's going to be our first top-tier resident today. Cisco is an average caloried freshwater fish with a solid micronutrient profile. It is a low protein and high fat fish, being one of the best omega 3 fish per calorie. Cisco is the best source on this list of vitamin A, which significantly contributes to macular health, and it's among the best sources of vitamin D and vitamin B12 as well. Cisco is low in mercury, making it overall one of the better small fish, and I'm going to put it in the A tier. Conch is an average caloried saltwater mollusk with a grand micronutrient profile. It is very high in protein per calorie and the best source on this list of folate, which is used in DNA, RNA, and red blood cell production, magnesium, which is most known for assisting muscle and nerve function, and vitamin E, an antioxidant mainly involved in immune health. Conch is also one of the better seafood sources of vitamin B12 and copper, and like most shellfish, it is pretty low in mercury. Its unique nutrients simply can't be denied, and I'm going to put conch in the top tier. Crappie is a lower calorie freshwater fish with a decent micronutrient profile, and can we all just collectively agree that that is the worst name ever? Anyway, crappie is high in protein per calorie and a good source of the usual selenium while containing a decent amount of the more elusive iron and calcium. It is a moderately mercury dense fish, and as a whole, it doesn't have the good traits to make up for that caution, so I'm going to put it in the C tier. Croaker is a higher calorie freshwater fish with a middling micronutrient profile. It is a somewhat fatty fish, but unfortunately its omega 3 content doesn't match, which is usually the main selling point for fattier fish. It's a dependable source of vitamin B12 and selenium, and low in mercury, so it's not actively harmful, but overall it's just outdone by much of the competition, and it's going to be going in the C tier because of that fact. Cusk is a lower caloried saltwater fish with a mediocre micronutrient profile. It is higher in protein per calorie than most fish, as well as creatine, which directly supplies energy to your muscles. Micro-wise, Cusk is a good source of selenium and contains a fair bit of the much rarer potassium and magnesium. Unfortunately, it's definitely a moderate mercury fish and does nothing to separate itself from that, thus it's going in the C tier. Drum is an average caloried freshwater fish with a solid micronutrient profile. It is a somewhat higher fat fish, making it a solid source of omega 3 fatty acids per calorie. Drum also contains a relevant amount of vitamin B12 and manganese. Unfortunately, all of the positive is offset by the fact that drum is one of the most mercury-ridden fish in the sea, and because of that, I'm going to put it in the D tier. Hake is a low-calorie saltwater fish with a mild micronutrient profile. It is a very high-protein fish per calorie, as well as one of the better fish sources of copper. Hake is also a safer low-mercury fish, but one that doesn't really do anything nutritionally to set it apart, which is going to lead Hake to a place in the C tier. King crab is a low-calorie saltwater crustacean with a superb micronutrient profile. It is an above-average source of protein and omega 3 fatty acids per calorie, so all of its merit doesn't lie strictly with the micros. Just most of it, as king crab is the best source on this list of zinc, which supports immune function and wound healing, and it's also among the highest in vitamin B12 and copper with a relevant magnesium content as well. King crab is obviously not for those with a shellfish allergy, but it is very low in mercury, so it's a pretty safe bet for everyone else. A food that seems to have everything going its way, king crab is going in the top tier. King mackerel is an average caloried saltwater fish with a respectable micronutrient profile. It is a high-protein fish that also contributes significantly in the vitamin department, including vitamin B12, vitamin B3, vitamin B6, and vitamin A. Unfortunately, king mackerel is notorious for being one of the most mercury-dense fish in the deep blue, and that completely offsets any positives to speak of. So I'm going to put king mackerel in the D tier. Ling is a lower-calorie deep-sea fish with a solid micronutrient profile. It is very high in protein per calorie, and a significant amount of its fat is omega 3 fatty acids. Ling is a good source of selenium and a relevant source of magnesium as well as creatine. Unfortunately, ling is also absurdly high in mercury, completely negating any reason why you might want to eat it. And for that, I'm going to put it in the D tier. Milkfish is a higher calorie fish found in both fresh and salt water with a good micronutrient profile. It's more caloric due to containing a high protein content and a high fat content with an impressive amount of omega 3s. Milkfish is higher in its creatine content, and it's among the best sources of vitamin B3. It does contain a moderate amount of mercury, but this is one of those cases where I think the good is definitely worth it as long as it's not overconsumed. All that to say, I'm going to put milkfish in the A tier. Monkfish is a low-calorie saltwater fish with a somewhat lesser micronutrient profile. It's as usual a good source of selenium, but it falls short in every other way that you would judge seafood. It's also a moderately mercury-dense fish, so you wouldn't be able to eat it that often even if you wanted to. All this leads monkfish to a D-tier placement. Mullet is an average caloried fresh and saltwater fish with a fairly standard micronutrient profile. However, macronutriently, it excels, being both a great source of protein and a solid contributor of omega-3 fatty acids. Mullet does contain a good amount of selenium, and it's higher in its creatine content. It's also a low mercury fish that can be safely eaten fairly often, but really its selling points lie in those macros, and that's going to land at a place in the A tier. Perch is a lower calorie freshwater fish with a typical micronutrient profile. It is higher in protein per calorie compared to most fish, and also higher in its manganese content, while containing a relevant amount of the more elusive zinc. Perch is a low mercury fish, and while it's got its quirks, it definitely falls under the category of kinda just a fish, one that I'm going to put in the B tier. Northern pike is a lower calorie freshwater fish with a lesser micronutrient profile. It does contain a high amount of protein per calorie, and it's a good source of vitamin B12 and creatine. Unfortunately, pike is often found to be very mercury dense. Not always, but enough to be wary, so I'm going to put it in the D tier. Atlantic pollock is a low-calorie saltwater fish with a solid micronutrient profile. It's pretty high in its protein content per calorie, and per calorie it's also a good source of vitamin B12, selenium, magnesium, and creatine. Pollock is a safe low-mercury fish that's one of the better fish that's just a fish. However, it is still just a fish, and a B-tier fish at that. Pompano is a higher calorie saltwater fish with a moderate micronutrient profile. It is undoubtedly a fatty fish, with a solid amount of it being the essential omega-3 fatty acids. Pompano is also among the best sources on this list of vitamin B1 and potassium. It is a low mercury fish, ultimately making it a pretty sweet deal nutritionally, one that I'm going to put in the A tier. Porgy, also known as scup, is an average caloried saltwater fish with a standard micronutrient profile. It does contain a good amount of omega-3s per calorie, and it's a good source of selenium and vitamin B12. Unfortunately, porgy is typically a moderately mercury-dense fish, and that fact is going to land it in the B tier. Rockfish is a lower calorie fish with a moderate micronutrient profile. It's among the best sources of selenium and a fair source of vitamin D and potassium, but unfortunately its relatively high mercury content drags it down into mediocrity. So overall, I'm going to put rockfish in the C tier. Orange Roughy is a low-calorie fish with a fairly disappointing micronutrient profile. It's high in protein per calorie, and it's actually the best source on this list of selenium, an antioxidant that's also used for DNA synthesis. Unfortunately, if there is one thing that the everyday person might know about the Orange Roughy is that it's very mercury-dense, completely offsetting any benefits and sending it down to the depths of the D tier. Sablefish is a high-calorie fish with a moderate micronutrient profile. The calories come from the fact that this is the highest fat fish on either list. Of that fat, a good amount of it is omega-3s, but more prominently, it's also the highest in the heart-healthy monounsaturated fatty acids per gram. Sablefish is also a good source of selenium and a relevant source of magnesium, but unfortunately, it is a moderately mercury-dense fish too. Taking all of this into consideration, I'm going to put sablefish in the B tier. Sea cucumber is a very low-calorie saltwater something with a lopsided micronutrient profile. It's actually the highest protein per calorie food on either list, and it's also the best source of vitamin B2, which mainly assists with red blood cell production. It's also the best source of copper per calorie. Sea cucumber is not for those taking blood thinners, but it is a low-mercury food, so it can be a pretty safe exotic choice for most, and I'm going to put it in the A tier. Shad is a very high-calorie, fresh and saltwater fish with a fairly standard micronutrient profile. It is one of the fattiest fish covered so far, and on average, one of the best omega-3 sources, bar none. Shad is the highest in vitamin B3 on this list, which boosts nervous, digestive, and skin health. And it's among the best fish sources of phosphorus. And shad is a low-mercury fish too, making it pretty close to the perfect package overall. An easy choice for the top tier. Shark is an average caloried, mostly saltwater set of fish with a decent micronutrient profile. They are surprisingly high in omega-3s per calorie, and they'll generally give you everything else you can expect from a typical fish. The main problem is that being the apex predators, shark may be the most famous example of a high mercury fish. And as usual, this is a hindrance that simply cannot be ignored, and because of it, I'm going to put sharks in the D tier. Sheepshead is an average caloried saltwater fish with a solid micronutrient profile. It's higher in its protein content per calorie, and it's among the best sources of phosphorus while being a great source of vitamin B12 and selenium. That, coupled with its low mercury content, actually makes sheephead a pretty good lean fish that I'm going to put in the B tier. Rainbow smelt is an average caloried fresh and saltwater fish with a more unique micronutrient profile. It's higher in omega-3s per calorie and it excels comparatively in a few key micros. Smelt is very high in vitamin B12 and contains a good amount of manganese and zinc for good measure. It's also a smaller, low-mercury fish, making it one of the better just a fish. And I'm going to put it in the A tier. Sockeye salmon is an average caloried fish in both fresh and salt water with an impressive micronutrient profile. It is astonishingly high in its protein content and respectably high in omega-3s, though not as much as other salmon like Atlantic or Chinook. Sockeye is also the best source on this list of vitamin D, which helps absorb calcium and phosphorus, vitamin B6, which plays crucial roles in brain development, and vitamin B5, which is used for macronutrient breakdown. It's also one of the very best sources of vitamin B3. Sockeye, as with most salmon, is low in mercury, and at this point, if you don't think it's going in the top tier, you're just living in denial. Sole is a very low-calorie saltwater fish with an inferior micronutrient profile. Honestly, this is an especially middle-of-the-road fish containing protein, omega-3s, and micros proportionate to its calories. It is low in mercury, so it's not actively harmful, but it does absolutely nothing to stand apart from the other fish, and I'm going to put it in the C tier. Spiny lobster, also known as rock lobster, is an average caloried saltwater crustacean with an imposing micronutrient profile. It is very high in protein and high in omega-3s per calorie. Spiny lobster is also among the best sources of zinc, vitamin B12, and selenium. Spiny lobster is not for those with a shellfish allergy, but it is low in mercury, so it's a pretty safe choice for many. Nutritionally, it excels, and I'm going to put spiny lobster in the top tier. Spot is an average caloried saltwater fish with a great micronutrient profile. This is one of those just a fish that has a pretty impressive protein and omega-3 content. It's also among the best sources of vitamin B12, vitamin B3, and uniquely potassium. It's a moderately mercury-dense fish, but this is one of those uncommon instances where the good qualities definitely make up for that. Overall, I'm going to put Spot in the A tier. Sturgeon is an average caloried fresh and saltwater fish with a solid micronutrient profile. It contains a good amount of omega-3 fatty acids, but the main standouts are vitamins. Notably, it excels in vitamin D, vitamin B3, and vitamin A. Sturgeon is a moderately mercury-dense fish, so it can't be eaten too often, but the upsides are definitely there, and I'm going to put it in the B tier. White sucker is an average caloried freshwater fish with a quality micronutrient profile. It's higher in its omega-3 content per calorie, and it's a genuinely good source of vitamin B12 and manganese. Sucker does contain a moderate amount of mercury, but in the end that just makes it a fairly standard fish that I'm going to put in the B tier. Tilefish is an average caloried saltwater fish with a solid micronutrient profile. Macronutritionally, tilefish is higher in protein and omega-3 fatty acids. Micronutritionally, it's a relevant source of vitamin B12, selenium, and potassium. It seems to be a pretty good contender until you realize that tilefish is one of the most infamously heavy metal dense fish on the planet, so you already know I can't recommend it, and I'm going to put it in the D tier. Turbot is an average caloried saltwater fish with a moderate micronutrient profile. It contains a decent amount of omega-3 fatty acids per calorie and a good amount of the usual vitamin B12 and selenium, as well as the more unique magnesium. However, turbot is a moderately mercury-dense fish, and it doesn't really set itself apart in any significant way, thus it's going in the B tier. Walleye is an average caloried freshwater fish with a distinctive micronutrient profile. Distinct because walleye is the best source on this list of manganese, most known for bone and hormone formation, and calcium, a crucial component of bones. It's also one of the better sources of vitamin B1, and it's higher in its creatine content. Unfortunately, these are not significant enough to make up for the moderate amount of mercury it contains, and walleye is going in the B tier. Whelk is a high-calorie saltwater mollusk with a straight-up ridiculous micronutrient profile. First off, it contains a notable carbohydrate content, but that pales in comparison to the fact that it has the most protein per gram of any animal covered in any tier list thus far. And it doesn't stop there, as its micronutrient contents can only be described with superlatives. Whelk is the best source on this list of vitamin B12, which is crucial for red blood cell formation and DNA synthesis, copper, which makes red blood cells and collagen, selenium, an antioxidant also used to make DNA, iron, which is used to make hemoglobin to transfer oxygen throughout the body, and potassium, which is used to maintain cellular fluid balance. It's also among the best sources of the essential vitamin B6 and magnesium. This ultimate nutritional powerhouse is also particularly low in mercury, so its downsides are minimal, at least the non-poisonous ones. No surprise, whelk is going in the top tier, as nutritionally it is the top dog. Fish. Snail thing. And last on this list, wolffish is an average caloried saltwater fish with a solid micronutrient profile. It is high in omega-3s per calorie and contains an on-par amount of vitamin B12 and selenium, but its overall mediocrity combined with its relatively high mercury content leads me to think that it belongs best in the C tier. It's pretty tough to go wrong with fish, at least nutritionally. As long as they're not directly killing you, like unfortunately many of them do, they're seemingly designed to give the body a significant amount of what it needs when consumed. So the message at the end of the day should be eat fish, eat it fairly regularly, but don't worry too much about what kind as they will all fill the role just as well. Except salmon. This video has confirmed my belief that there's nothing quite like wild-caught salmon. Now if you enjoyed this video, or at the very least learned a little something, I encourage you to subscribe as I have plenty more of these on the way. I also encourage you to share it with someone who you think might find it helpful or interesting. Go ahead and let me know down in the comments what other things you want me to rank, and remember that all I ask is that you do your own research and advocate for your body. You only get the one.